Good morning, and thank you for coming and joining us today. I'm Eric Schneiderman, the New York State Attorney General. I'm joined here today by Assistant Attorney General Meyer Saxena of my Office of Civil Rights Bureau, and by representatives of quite a few groups who work on the cause of equal justice under law every day in this area. Brendan Mahaffey, the Executive Director of the City of Buffalo's Office of Strategic Planning, representing Mayor Byron Brown, is here. Joe Kellenman, the Executive Director of the Western New York Law Center, and many colleagues from the Western New York Law Center. Kirk Labenstein, the Executive Director, and Andy Reynolds, the Communication Director of the Coalition for Economic Justice. Francesca Messiah, the Vice President of the NAACP Buffalo. Scott Gell, Executive Director of Home Buffalo. Sam McGavern, the Co-Director of Partnership for the Public Good. John Kerr from the Western Regional Office of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and Aaron Bartley, Executive Director of Push Buffalo. And there obviously are other attorneys in our office who have worked on this matter, both in our Buffalo office and in New York City. This morning, my office filed a lawsuit against Evans Bank Corp. And Evans Bank N.A., charging that from at least 2009 to the present, Evans has engaged in intentional discrimination by redlining. That is, denying entire neighborhoods access to credit because of those neighborhoods' racial composition. Specifically, based on a review of the bank's own internal documents, we're alleging that Evans has systematically denied its residential mortgage lending products and services to African Americans in the Buffalo metro area. We believe that Evans has intentionally excluded predominantly African American neighborhoods from its lending area, denied access to mortgage lending products to people living in predominantly African American neighborhoods, no matter how creditworthy a particular applicant might be, and has refused to solicit customers, market loan products, or provide banking facilities in predominantly African American neighborhoods. Evans' intentional discrimination against African Americans continues to this day. If you look at the map here, you can see how the bank carved up the city. This is a document. This is a document that was created by the bank. They defined it. It's the same insidious intent and same insidious effect. This is, again, comes from documents generated by Evans. Their own lending policy describes the trade area, which is the part in red, as the geographic area where Evans solicits business and markets its lending products and services. The lending policy requires that Evans management must ensure that the needs of the trade area are being met. And as for loan requests from outside the trade area, the excluded African American communities, they're supposed to be evaluated on what they call an individual case-by-case basis while considering multiple factors, including, again, this comes from the bank, a case-by-case basis while considering multiple factors, including a policy of limiting, and I quote, the concentration of loans outside our trade area. So they have an explicit map showing that they're redlining the African American community. They have explicit policies saying that the bank's practice is to limit loans to those communities. Certain mortgage products are not available at all to people who live outside the trade area. And for these products and services, borrowers with properties outside the trade area are automatically disqualified, regardless of how creditworthy they are. The bank also has a practice of marketing loan products and services in a manner that excludes African Americans and residents of the East Side neighborhoods. If you look at the distribution of the bank's branch offices, and we have another chart that shows where they are. Needless to say, there is no bank branch or ATM in the excluded neighborhood. The bank's offices and ATMs actually form a ring around the African American communities designated by the blue areas. Inside that exclusion area of East Side neighborhoods, there's not a single Evans branch office or ATM. As to the bank's marketing, Evans placed the vast majority of its print media advertising in local newspapers with a limited geographic circulation, such as the Amherst Bee, the Cheektowaga Bee, and the North Buffalo Rocket. None of these local newspapers is distributed to the East Side neighborhoods. Similarly, Evans placed advertising in ethnic media sources, such as the Am-Pol Eagle, a publication directed towards the Polish community, which is largely white. However, documents produced by Evans indicate that the bank did not place any advertising at all in ethnic newspapers or other media outlets directed towards the African American community. Based on this evidence, were accusing Evans of illegal redlining in violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act, in violation of the New York State human rights law, and in violation of the code of the city of Buffalo. Now, it is possible to claim, and we expect that the traditional defense in a redlining case is that race has nothing to do with this, that it just doesn't make sense from a business point of view to market loan products or to solicit business in the neighborhoods because of socioeconomic factors. An analysis of other banks doing business here undercuts that argument completely. When you look at banks that have at least one branch on the east side of Buffalo, most banks have multiple branches, by the way, locally. They are making loans at several times the rate of Evans, and they are soliciting mortgages and other loan products as well. The numbers show that Evans stands out when compared to all other banks, and that has led to the conclusion that this cannot possibly be accidental or attributable to any other factor. They're deliberately engaging in traditional redlining with a substantial impact on the community. An analysis of Evans' lending activity from 2009 to 2012 compared to other comparable banks shows statistically significant disparities. It shows that Evans failed to draw residential mortgage applications and originate mortgage loans to African American borrowers and East Side residents at rates comparable to those of competing banks. According to data that Evans was required to maintain and report under the Federal Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, Evans received 1,114 residential mortgage applications in the Buffalo-Niagara metropolitan statistical area from 2009 to 2012. Of these, only 4 came from applicants reporting as African American. So only 4 out of 1,114 mortgage applications came from applicants who reported as African American. That means Evans generated mortgage applications from the African American community at a rate of 0.36%. And of those 1,114 residential mortgages, just 8 came from within the East Side area, and of those, only 1 came in from an applicant reporting as African American. By comparison, from 2009 to 2012, comparable banks in the Buffalo-Niagara area with at least one branch office in Buffalo generated mortgage applications from East Side neighborhoods at rates several times greater than that of Evans. Also, an analysis of the residential mortgage loans actually made by Evans reveals statistically significant failures to make loans to African American applicants and residents of East Side neighborhoods. Other banks had no problem making loans in this area. Our complaint alleges that Evans Bank has intentionally engaged in a systematic policy of illegal redlining that has had a disparate impact on African Americans in the areas it is supposed to serve. This lawsuit is a part of a wider ongoing investigation by my Civil Rights Bureau into mortgage redlining by banks in our state. That investigation was prompted by concerns that banks had stopped lending to minority communities in the wake of the mortgage crisis and financial collapse of 2008, and the parallel concern that the same kinds of mortgage products were not being made available to minority communities. Both of those factors are clearly present in the case of Evans. New York State is perhaps the most segregated state in the country. It is, and it is also important to note that Buffalo, according to the 2010 census, the Buffalo metro area was designated as the 6th most highly segregated large metropolitan area in the entire United States. So the concentration of the African American community and the lines drawn by this map are really all the evidence you need for us to make the point that Evans is chosen to exclude these communities, has chosen to discriminate against the people who live in these communities and make loans in other communities of comparable socioeconomic status, the only difference being race. So it is in our job in the Office of the Attorney General and working with our colleagues who are standing with us today to ensure that this sort of discriminatory practice does not go on in the state of New York. I honestly never thought I would get to bring a redlining case, or I would have to bring a redlining case, because this is a problem we thought we'd put behind us a couple of decades ago. It is really unfortunate that a bank would resort to this sort of a practice, and it is up to our office to seek to enforce the law and apply equal justice under law across the state. We will not tolerate racial discrimination in the state of New York, and we have to be very clear about that. Financial institutions can't use the fact that the housing market crashed as an excuse to exclude black communities from their loan products, to exclude black communities from the marketing so they know what loan products are available, to exclude black communities from any access to service in branches or ATMs. We will pursue this case against Evans Bank to the fullest extent possible under the law, and will continue to enforce anti-discrimination laws so East Side residents and all residents of New York State will never suffer from illegal racial discrimination. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take some questions.